Hello and welcome to the Greg Struss Show. I'm Greg Struss, coming to you almost live and direct here from Cable Television City in the west side of Chicago, and I am grateful that you're tuning in tonight, wherever you may be, because you might be watching us on YouTube.com or you might be watching us on television, right? Because this is still considered a television show. We're in a television studio, in a television complex, in an isolated area in Elmhurst, but I am so thankful that you're tuning in. And tonight we're going to be talking about something I was listening to on the Big John Howell Show today on AM 89. I love that show. It's on from 5 to 7. Consequences, okay? I think consequences is a good thing to talk about because of what's going on in politics, in news, and in our everyday life, okay? So a couple things going on right now. There are impeachment inquiries, okay? They're going to be inquiring into an impeachment for the president in the House of Representatives, which is predominantly Democrat, and they've launched investigations based on a telephone call and I think second or third hand knowledge, okay? So everybody's kind of upset about this. I won't say everybody, because the media kind of always says that everyone. Now this is what I've taken into consideration when I start hearing that most Americans, or I'm going to do quotation marks, okay? Most Americans believe that President Trump should be impeached, okay? Should. All right, which are the most Americans? Most of the Americans or most of the people that are watching NBC, most of Americans that are watching CBS, most Americans that are watching MSNBC. What Americans, okay? So obviously, if you have one outlier, okay, which is Fox News, they've definitely been pro-Trump for the most part. Now they're starting to get under the president's skin and starting to, you know, kind of question him on some things. Where are the most Americans, okay? So you take a look at the New York Times, big paper, many years, okay? What is the New York Times? Who's reading the New York Times? Is it mostly people in New York? Because it is a New York paper, but you have people in Chicago reading that paper, just like people in New York will read the Chicago Tribune or the Chicago Sun-Times. Newspapers always served a purpose. Now in this new media age, it's getting kind of questionable, but they still lean a certain way. Just like when, I love when Brian Williams rips on Breitbart as saying that it's mostly a conservative site. Yeah, so if 98% of Americans that are on Breitbart lean a certain way politically, they're going to say that President Trump, they stand with him because it's a conservative website. So really what the lesson is for me in all of this is that I really have to look at the middle, all right, and look at reality. What are the corporate interests of each of these companies and who are they appealing to, okay? So this is why I said several years ago when the election was, when they were campaigning for the 2016 election, I didn't buy, for the first time in my life, I didn't buy all of the polls. I said, there's something that's strange about these polls, and I couldn't put my pulse on it. I mean, I couldn't put my finger on the pulse. But something just didn't seem right to me because there are so many as what we call outliers. What about those people that are on a farm and aren't really, dealing with technology every day, aren't dealing with, they're dealing with farming. That's what they do. They're not into high tech. And maybe they still watch television, right? And then you have people that are in other suburban areas that might not, or urban areas, or rural areas that don't really follow the news other than in their local newspaper or a national broadcast like CBS, NBC, ABC, or maybe they have cable and watch Fox. I'm not saying that people that live in rural areas are uneducated or anything else. I'm not alluding to that. Where do we get our news from and where do we get our information from? Now the other thing that I like to talk about, this is a while ago, was when Jay Leno was leaving The Tonight Show. It was all a well-orchestrated, all of this is well-orchestrated. You have talking points. I'm sure they sat down either with his representatives or sat down with him and said, Jay, when you go to 60 Minutes, this is what, we don't want you to say this. You're free to say boom, boom, boom. So as you see in every interview leading up to his final broadcast, he was basically saying the same things, which sounded to me like talking points that were agreed on with the corporation that wouldn't muddy the water for that transition. So this is why having an independent thought, having an independent mind is very important. And then here's the other outlier. How many people who support President Trump are even going to speak about it in public? Okay, one of the biggest problems right now for human resources managers, these are the people that handle serious problems in workplaces, okay? When a manager can no longer handle a situation, they'll turn it over to human resources, and the person, the employee, will be called into the office and interviewed and be counseled on what the proper behavior is for the workforce. Now, it goes back to what Grandpa Struss said to me. I think I was about 5 years old. Grandpa Struss was great. He played baseball on the Pittsburgh Pirates, came up through the Farm League in the Quad Cities, and is in the Rosalynn Pullman Hall of Fame for baseball, posthumously. So it happened, I believe, the year after he passed away. But Grandpa Struss came from, he was born in 1909 and came from a different time. He was not college educated. He was basically a factory worker who had life experience, okay? He passed that down to me and said, look, the things you never want to talk about are money, politics, and religion, because they're topics that people cannot agree on. And now all of those topics are talked about openly. And then we're finding out why are we having so many differences? It's because we're all giving our opinion instead of working together for whatever that cause is. And when we're at the office, we need to work on being at work. We're going to talk about consequences tonight for the things we say, the things we do, and also how technology is changing things. And we're also going to talk about Kim Foxx, the Cook County State's Attorney, who's being investigated by someone who, an outside prosecutor outside of Cook County who happened to donate $1,000 to her election campaign and does not recall. Anyway, good show tonight. Glad you're with us. This is the Greg Struss Show. I'm Greg Struss. We're reinventing community television here from the west side of Chicago. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back in just a moment. This is the Greg Struss Show. I'm Greg Struss, and you can watch us every Wednesday night, where we've been airing for over 7 years in the west suburbs of Chicago on Xfinity Comcast, 8 o'clock, Channel 19, and on YouTube.com with the search words The Greg Struss Show. Back in the day, we were talking about technology before we started the show here. With Adam, he's in sports, love him. And Lee, who is my guy out here. Now I'm going to refer to Lee as my guy. He's our guy out here. And so Adam works on Channel 100 things in the sports. They go out with a whole crew and cover basketball, hockey, I believe football games with all the high schools. And they've been doing this for years. And I'm not kidding you. They do outstanding work. And it's been the same team for many years. I believe Andy is the director. He's down in Homewood. Andy Zilikowski, I believe is his name. And they just do great work. So we were talking about a little bit about how technology has changed, and then Lee was talking about Community Connection, where they do one show a month. They're also on Channel 100. That show's been going on for years and years and years. I hope you tune into it on Channel 100 if you're on the Comcast system. I can't really plug it because we're on a different side of this and we're not affiliated with Comcast. But great guys. And I always get educated because it's like, wow, the one thing that never changes or that's always changing in life is technology. And the way that things are done now. Now, even though we're working out of a television studio, everything is switched to, single camera, HD TV, and no longer is videotape being used. Everything is recorded on a device, like a file-based system. So whereas years and years and years ago, now you take a look at like Johnny Carson and his early Tonight shows, most of which were erased. You take a look, if they were doing roughly 200 shows a year, you know, if you take the average 200, 240 shows a year for the first 5, 6 years, and each of those shows were like 90 minutes long, imagine how much room, how much space it took or takes to store all of those videotapes. You have the boxes, the reels, and everything else. And then as formats change and machines break down and things become obsolete, how do you transfer those things to another format? So I'll give you an example. There's a gentleman that's been working out of this facility for 34 years, and I just think the world of Bill Wilt. He was very kind to me when I was much younger, and I still run into him occasionally. He's a much, you know, he's a mature man now. I think he was more my age when I met him, and he was doing the Motorsports Unlimited show. He was going on Johnny B when Johnny B was on the Loop, and he was very popular. And I don't know if that show would pass today with the so-called girls, because it was very, you know, he always had women with feathers and like jumpsuits with the Motorsports Unlimited, and he always had them talking, and that's why a lot of men watched that show. It was because of the pretty ladies that were on it. I don't think that show would make it today without people being really upset about something. But it broke ground, and you know, and Bill's still doing things the old school way, much like I do some things the old school way as we produce this show. And I'm trying to think, he probably has done over 2,000 shows. All right, so you figure back in the day, he was bicycling his tapes. He would have to go to 25 different head ends or stations, as we call them in cable. And you'd say hi to the Lees. Lee is in charge of us out here, so we would drop a tape off, and you'd say hi to all the people that are there, and then you go on to the next place, say hi to everybody over there, and you made sure your show was getting on. And they would comment on it, like, hey, thanks for that show, it was good, we heard about this, that, the other thing, and whatever. So now I hear, as before the show, you figure that if you're taking 10 or 25 separate tapes to a different place, you have to make 25 copies of that same show or have 25 different shows running in 25 different places. So I would venture to say that Bill probably has an entire basement full of videotapes from your 3/4-inch VHS, whatever. So now everything is just done on a little file. I have like boxes of videotapes in my garage, my closet, whatever. Most of them are labeled. I know what's on most of them. But I need to transfer them because they're taking up a lot of room and they're on formats that are no longer supported. So one thing that always changes is technology. Technology is always changing. So how is technology like life? Life, we're always changing, we're always growing, we're always thrown new things. So I think if we adapt to change, and what's one of the ways we adapt is getting rid of our flip phone and going to an Android. If we don't like the Android, we go to the Apple. But I refuse to pay $1,200 for a phone. I just can't do it. And I'm supposed to be a media guy and in the know or whatever, and I just refuse to do it. I have what I need, and I'm working on what I'd like, what I want. All right? Because there comes a point in time where what I need is just kind of getting by. And what I want is something that I have to take action to achieve, right? So if I want to lose weight, I have to make the effort. If I want to get a different job, I have to apply for it. And I have to suit up and show up, as they say. And that's what recovery work is about. It's about suiting up, not necessarily wearing a suit, but suiting up and being ready to let it all hang out, so they say, all right? So I have to suit up and I have to what? Show up. And now showing up is 97% of the effort. 3% is there. But 97% is that, you know what? I got to suit up and I got to show up. And I think the third one is I got to shut up and I got to listen. And that's the problem. So in work, right now, people are giving all their personal opinions when it has nothing to do with the job. So it kind of goes back to what Grandpa Struss said. Don't talk about politics at work. do the job because you have to do the job. The other thing is, what about these interpersonal relationships at work? What about dating somebody that I work with? And why is that not good? And these young men just don't get it. I don't care if you're working at a pizza place or somewhere else. Usually it's different like that because you're young and there's young people working there. But as we move on into our profession, it's not a good idea to date people we work with. Now, do people do it? Absolutely. I have a friend who married a coworker. They worked together for years. Her husband just retired, and they were very successful in their job. She kept her maiden name in her job. Even though everybody knew they were married, they kept it professional and never got involved in each other's business at work. So they took care of it. So it's kind of interesting. But isn't it kind of, if we go back to that simplicity of suiting up, showing up, and shutting up, and doing our job, that things are going to be okay. And we don't have to worry about a visit to the Human Resources Department. So we're talking about consequences. So a consequence for being involved with somebody I work with is when that relationship doesn't work out anymore. Does it spill over into the job? Do our arguments and disagreements start pouring into the job? And then all of a sudden we're no longer on personal basis, we're on business relations, but the relationship is so strained that maybe it's standing in the way of our job. And what's going to happen? One of us is going to go, or both of us is going to go. And if I have a mortgage and I have a car payment, I have kids in school, and I got bills to pay, is it really a good idea to start out with? And I really think it's that simple. We got to put some effort. I have to put some effort into thinking. Now, the other part of it is like, well, will I ever meet anyone? Where do I meet people if I'm not meeting people at work? So I just, I see how I've grown in that. I worked at a police department. I was so overly emotionally involved. I was emotionally involved in that job because we were dealing with life and death, and it was a very taxing and consuming job. And that's on me because I allowed it to be. I worried about people's safety. I worried about that police officer. Now, did a lot of that have to do with maturity? Absolutely. Even though people told me you're very mature for your age, I still was in my early 20s, so I wasn't really a fully developed man. Okay, and I don't know if I'm a fully developed man at this point in time. I'm still learning things, but I think what happens is as we mature and go through life experiences, it changes our views on things. So I see where I was maybe a little more emotional than what I would have been. But you know what? There's not anyone there that would never have worked with me because they always knew that I had their back. Now, was I a little emotional at times? Absolutely. Can I be embarrassed about something 20 years ago? Like if it came out, oh, Struss was very emotional about his job. I'm not saying I broke down and cried and carried on and things like that, but I got emotional about things. And probably I still do get emotional about things because if I'm not focused on what I need to be doing, okay, bettering myself, career-wise, etc., all those little things start to kind of creep in and weigh me down. So I think it's very important to realize that there's consequences for inaction and there's consequences for action. Pat Foley, the great Blackhawks announcer, made a comment, innocuous, okay, it was just like off the cuff, about a Hispanic player stating that he should be a shortstop. All right, so I think it's because there's a lot of Latinos playing baseball now. And it was probably an innocent comment, but somebody got offended by it. And he had to apologize. Now get this, the player didn't really comment on it. His people did, the league did, and they're not going to have any more comment. So if the guy was offended, why didn't he confront him personally and say, you know what, I really didn't appreciate that comment, and I'd appreciate you not saying it again. But people lose their broadcast careers and high-paying jobs over things they say because there's consequences. And part of education, part of learning, and like technology always changing, norms change. And this is why I really think that when people make a comment 20 years ago, that we have the ability, I have the ability, I'm saying we, I have the ability to change. I have the ability to change my opinion, to change my outlook, and based on a life experience, change my opinion. and maybe speak of something as fact because I experienced it, whereas before I was ignorant to somebody else because I didn't experience it. So I have a consequence for saying something if I'm on television that offends someone. Now, if one person is offended, I don't know. I still offended somebody and I have to answer to that, but I don't think I should be fired for it. And again, attitude comes into it as well. So I have to be open-minded that, you know what, maybe what I'm saying other people are entertained by, but there's always those people that will be offended by it, and there's consequences for that. So I always have to be thinking. And that's why television in many levels, on the local level, is so lame, because people are too afraid to go out and do something different. Not to offend, but in doing something different, sometimes people get offended. It's like art. We'll talk more about that. I'm Greg. This is The Greg Struss Show. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back in just a moment. I am almost of the belief that Caitlyn Bruce Jenner made this change because it would keep her in the public eye. I am, because I find it kind of self-serving that she, also known as Bruce, made this change shortly before there was a TV series coming out on the E! Network. This is The Greg Struss Show. I'm Greg Struss. And we were talking about consequences before the show. Not before the show, before the break. See what a consequence is? I step on something and then I got to correct myself. So it really comes down to personal accountability and personal responsibility. Now, I was saying at the beginning of the program tonight that Kim Foxx, her office is being investigated by a special prosecutor outside of the Cook County legal system. All right, there was a retired judge, Sheila O'Brien, who took issue with the way the Jussie Smollett case was issued. Now, she wasn't the only person. I would venture to say that a lot of people took issue with the Jussie Smollett case and the way that it was handled and the way that the charges were dismissed. So in June of 2019, yes, they appointed Judge Toonen, who's with the Cook County system, appointed this special prosecutor. Well, the news comes out the other day that this special prosecutor donated $1,000 to Kim Foxx's campaign, and that she attended a special fundraiser at his law firm's office that he does not recall giving a check, even though the canceled check is sitting in his account. Doesn't recall it. So what's the consequence for that? Should he be allowed to, now given today's norms, all right, given today's norms and values based on how offended and how wrong things are, should this guy be allowed to continue as the special prosecutor in her case? I say absolutely not. And you're going to say, Greg, what's your problem? Some of you might. And I'll say, because it's dirty, all right? He knows the person he's investigating. Can he separate his political and professional leanings? Now, even though he may be conservative and she is Democrat, doesn't matter. he still donated money to her election campaign for professional reasons because his law firm said so. I don't buy it. And I think this guy needs to go. And they need to get someone from another state. But it isn't going to happen. And then all of a sudden, Jussie Smollett comes back on because someone, other cases have been have been popping up in the news on how people have faked or staged certain crimes. And he says, y'all can knock on me all you want, but my story never changed. Right. But a lie is still a lie. Okay? If I'm lying and telling a lie is the truth, the underlying meaning is that it's still a lie. And the consequences for that lie is when I get caught, like he did. He got caught in a lie. Why is it a lie? He got fired from his job at Empire, at Fox. I always find it funny that he all of a sudden starts talking and showing up on social network sites a day before the show goes on the air. I don't think that's good for the show because it just reminds people not to watch the show because the guy is a liar, okay? I shouldn't say he's a liar. He doesn't tell the truth. He's much like Hillary Clinton on a lot of different levels, and most politicians, not most, but many. They'll tell you what you want to hear. Oh, it's great. There's people I like. You always want to keep things on a positive light. And a competitor, it gets so horrible. If I was competing against certain people, I'd say, I like their work. I think they're doing a great job. It's not personal for me, okay? Good competition promotes good programming. And it can, and good competition, keeps us on our toes that, wow, someone's breathing down my neck. I got to work a little harder or a little smarter and do whatever. But a lot of people get to be that number one guy or that number one girl and kind of lose sight of it. They've been number one for so long. I think the Today Show was a perfect example. Matt Lauer was number one for a number of years, and all of a sudden, Good Morning America took over. Now, even though they're winning the demo, the money, where the money is, they still haven't recaptured the major audience and the demo. So the bragging rights is always, I have the most viewers, but it's really about the money. So if you have the money in the demo, that's where you're winning. So that's something that's interesting too. So in all of this, it's very important that I continue to have my own voice as I'm watching the news and listening to what's happening, all right? Deciphering what is a political message and what the truth is, and where we're going to go with the truth. Not based on what a politician is telling me, but what the evidence is telling me. So I hope that, I continue to be able to decipher what a political message is, what's something, and trust me, this whole thing with the president is all political because they've been trying to take him out, whoever they are. And it's all political. It's not about what's right or what's wrong. It's about we don't like the guy and we want him out. That's what the truth is. You can hate him, you can dislike him or whatever, he's still the president of the United States. And they're being dumb, in my opinion, because it's really up to the American people to vote for the person they like. And if he's really dishonest, he's not going to win the election. That's it. And what it's doing is pushing people to vote for him. That's what it's doing. And I think that's what's going to happen. So we'll take a look a year from now and see if Greg's right or Greg is wrong. It's just an opinion. Anyway, you can watch the Greg Struss Show here on Xfinity Comcast every Wednesday night, Channel 19, where we've been for 7 years. And of course, on youtube.com with the search words of Greg Struss Show. And I appreciate you tuning in tonight and dropping us a line. You can also do that at gstrussman@gmail.com. Greg Struss, thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time. Goodbye, everybody.